Hey everyone, if we're meeting for the first time, my name is Vojchehoske and welcome to Nebraska Landlords YouTube channel, where my mission is simple, and that is to enhance the landlord-tenant relationship. So there is a trend that we're starting to see in this industry where property managers and some landlords, although it's not really taken off too much in the landlording community yet, and that is they are collecting additional security deposits upon the tenant's lease renewal. Because rents are going up so quickly and so steeply, without doing that, there is a huge spread between the amount of rent that the tenant is paying and how much of a security deposit they did pay. We also see this with long-term tenants. So let's look at some numbers and how it might impact those of you here in Nebraska. So let's say, for example, that 2 years ago, you entered into a lease agreement with one of your tenants and they agreed to pay $1,000 a month rent, and it's a 2-year lease. And in addition, you collected a $1,000 security deposit and $250 in pet deposits. The 2 years is up, your tenant wants to stay, and they're ready to sign a lease renewal. What's happening is upon that lease renewal, and given the example we have on your screen, you're going to go to your tenant and say, upon the lease renewal, rent's going up $200. That means $1,200 a month is the new rent price. But we're also going to collect an additional $250 in deposits. $200 as a security deposit and $50 in a pet deposit. That is collecting additional deposits upon the lease renewal. And the reason I gave you these specific numbers is it's very important that you understand in the state of Nebraska that there is a statutory limit on how much you can collect in deposits in Nebraska. So in Nebraska, you can only collect up to 100% of the amount of the monthly rent. So your original lease agreement, in our example, your rent price was $1,000 a month. So therefore, you were only legally allowed to collect $1,000 in a security deposit. And then the Nebraska statute puts a cap on pet deposits. It allows you to collect an additional 25% of 1 month's rent as a pet deposit. So total, with the base rent of $1,000 a month, you could legally collect $1,250. Fast forward 2 years later, your tenant is going to sign a new lease. They agreed to pay $1,200 a month in rent, which is a $200 a month increase. The other thing at that point you're allowed to do is also collect an additional security deposit amount. So based on our scenario where the rent's gone up $200 a month, you would be legally able to collect an additional $200 in security deposits and an additional $50 as a pet deposit. So you would be setting on a total of $1,500 in deposits. Now, don't forget those proper notices. Even though it's a fixed expiration lease that is being renewed, it still is a good idea, and you're going to have to give a 30-day notice. If it's a month, you got to give a 30-day notice of not only the rent increase, but also the increase in, or the collection of the additional deposits as well. So keep that in mind. Otherwise, you might find yourself in a little bit of jeopardy if your tenant challenges you on that. Now, is it a good idea? Number one, is it a good idea? And number two is, in the parts of the country that are doing this, what kind of pushback have they gotten from the tenants? So I did a little bit of research on this. And first of all, is it a good idea? Can't answer that. That's totally up to your business model. And there are two camps. There is one camp that says, listen, this is a for-profit venture, and if the market will bear a rent increase, we do the rent increase. If the tenant leaves, fine, we'll find a new tenant that'll pay the higher rent price. This would include collecting additional deposits. The other camp is, you know what, if I got a decent tenant, I don't want to rock the boat. I'm going to keep the rent a little bit lower than what I could get, and I'm not going to harass them or nickel and dime them with $250 extra because I don't want to lose them. Now, one thing you want to consider before you make a decision one way or another, think about this. As you know, if you've been to like Lowe's or Home Depot, the cost of goods and materials has skyrocketed. And so if your tenant does damages, it's going to cost you a lot more to repair those damages than it did even 2 years ago. So that extra $250 may be very helpful. The other thing to remember is with long-term tenants. It's very common with long-term tenants. And I mean those tenants that are there 5, 6, 10 years. What we typically see is, even if the landlord did rent increases, number one, they still were under market value for rents, and almost never do they collect additional deposits. So you might find over a 5-year period that your rents have gone up 50 or 60%, but yet your security deposit is the same as it was the first day that they signed the lease agreement, which puts you at risk, because the longer a tenant is in that property, makes sense, the more damage that property is going to sustain from that tenant, even if they're a good tenant. So this gives you the ability to mitigate some of those damages in those aspects. So just make sure that you think this through before you jump to the conclusion that this isn't a good idea. Now, what have I seen in other parts of the country and managers that have done this? And almost all of them have said that in the single family home arena, very little to no pushback. They may comment on it initially, like, are you serious? Are you going to do that? They just simply say, yep, that's the way it is. If you want the property, if you want to stay there, great. If not, you can move and I'll find somebody else. And almost all the time, the tenants pay it. They may not like it, but they pay it. It's been a little bit more of a mixed bag in the apartment community. Some managers do it in the apartment communities and some don't. But the single family arena, we've seen a lot of good success using this tool. Hey guys, don't forget to stay informed. Join our email list, and there's a link right here for you to just go in, put your email address and your first name, and that'll sign you up for our weekly email. Stay informed of what's going on in the landlording community in Nebraska. I highly encourage that. All right, everybody, I'll see you in the next informative video.